Hi, my name is Lauren, and the first thing that I learned from reading this chapter was that it took about 8 years or 15 years ago, when talking about the Earth's age divided by 100 million, for there to be enough oxygen in the atmosphere to support significant numbers of complex cells. It's kind of crazy to me to think that at some point there was not enough oxygen to support the number of cells on this planet that we have now. Another thing I learned is that the true rotational period of Earth is actually called the sidereal day, and this is useful in astronomy and navigation. I understood the process and actually knew the process, but I didn't know the exact term was sidereal day, which is cool. Another thing I learned is that US Navstar Global Positioning, or GPS, consists of 24 navigational systems that cover the entire world. I find this extremely fascinating, as 24 doesn't seem like very many or enough for the entire world. I also learned that stars are responsible for the formation of elements heavier than lithium, and then they fuse hydrogen and helium to form even heavier elements. And then more massive stars continue the nuclear fusion process to create elements as heavy as iron. I think this is honestly quite amazing to think about. One thing that I found interesting from this chapter was learning more about the Prime Meridian, because I have actually visited the Royal Navy Observatory in Greenwich, England. Specifically, I learned that the crosshairs in the eyepiece of the telescope define the exact longitude degree 0 degrees for the whole world, which is pretty cool. I also learned that the meaning behind the Pacific Ocean is from the Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan, and he called it Mar Pacifico, which literally means peaceful sea. And he called it this because of the calm weather that he and his crew enjoyed while crossing the ocean, which I think is interesting, because when you think of an ocean, you don't necessarily think of it being a peaceful body of water at all times. And that was interesting that him and his crew experienced a peaceful journey. I also found it interesting that at the specific orbital distances from the Sun, the Earth's orbit keeps the annual heating and cooling cycle within moderate limits. It's cool to think that the Earth's orbit has the ability to heat and cool to the perfect temperatures without really being programmed to do so. They just kind of knows what to do. The last thing I found interesting was about the Hubble Space Telescope, that it circles the Earth every 97 minutes. When you think about how long that is when going about your day on a normal day, it doesn't seem like a very long amount of time. So when you think about it circling the Earth every 97 minutes, that kind of seems unrealistic, that it can circle the Earth in that amount of time, which is very interesting. One thing that I would love to learn more about is reservoirs and the specifics behind each one and the amounts of water in them at any given point. I'd like to know more about this because I absolutely love going to the reservoir here in Findlay, and also the ones by my house. I would also love to learn more about the whole half-life process and the specifics behind it relating to the Earth and all of those connections. The last thing I found interesting and would like to know more about is the traditional view of the Earth forming as a dry planet, and why it's been recently challenged with some current evidence of it forming as a wet planet. I think this would be cool to learn more about and also possibly research more. One question I have after reading this chapter is, why is the lunar month longer than the time it takes the moon to orbit the Earth? In the book, it states that the moon, it takes the moon 27 1/3 days to orbit the Earth, but the lunar month is actually 29 1/2 days. I'm not sure if there was a super clear explanation. If there was, I did not understand it. The second question I have is, how did they, or how could they, measure the amount of salt addition to the oceans from rivers? That seems like it could be a lengthy process, and it didn't really explain the steps in the book. The last question I had after reading the chapter was about the annual transfer rates and why they're measured in thousands of cubic kilometers, and why they couldn't use a simpler unit of measurement, and if there were specific reasons as to why this unit was chosen, and if so, like, what are the benefits in using it. Overall, I found this chapter somewhat of a refresher from junior high and high school, but I also learned a lot and a lot of things that were quite interesting.